This is a cottage industry. We're just growing out of our hobby and trying to share what we love. So it's hard to put a price on that. But yeah, I like what you've said about doing your research out there, knowing your ideal customer. Welcome to Quilting on the Side, the podcast where we uncover the secrets to turning your passion for quilting into a profitable side hustle.
I'm Tori from the Quilt Patch by Tori.
And I'm Andi from True Blue Quilts. And together we're your co-hosts on this exciting journey of creativity, entrepreneurship, and all things quilting.
We're here to help you navigate the world of quilt pattern design, course creation, digital marketing, and running an online quilt business. We've been through the ups and downs ourselves, so we know what it takes to make money from your favorite hobby.
In this episode, we want to talk about money because some of these insider secrets tend to intimidate people as they're getting started with business. They don't know how to make money, how to price their offers. So let's take some time today, Tori, and dive into how to price things in your business.
Yeah, definitely. Pricing is a huge barrier for some entrepreneurs starting out or even trying to grow. So a couple of things to consider before you really dive deep into your offer, whether that be a workshop or a long arming service or a pattern design business, your patterns themselves. There's a few things to consider, like how much do you need to be able to deliver that service? So how much do you need to actually make to be able to deliver what you're offering? And then under what conditions do you need to thrive? Because giving something away for a low cost doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. You put all that effort, time, and value into something, and if you're not giving it the price that makes you feel good so that you can thrive and give that excitement and that really great value in a really positive way, it's not gonna do good for you or your customers. And then think about, how does your pricing reflect that condition? Like, is it reflecting that it's helping you thrive? So those are really cool ideas I got from Rachel Rogers, which last week we talked about her book, We Should All Be Millionaires. So that Rachel Rogers. And those are some questions I wanted to lead off our discussion with because I thought they were really valuable. And then something else that's come inside the quilting industry and outside the quilting industry is to charge for value, not for time. So we're not working on an hourly base. We are working with our value. So your experience, your time spent learning the craft, which can go hand in hand with experience, but also you're charging not just for the time spent with the customer, because I'm thinking it from like a workshop point of view. You're also charging for the results you're offering that individual. So a value-based price instead of an hourly based price, I think is very, very important when considering your pricing. And then lastly, before we dive into more of a strategy, how to do this thing, is keep in mind that low prices bring everyone down. It doesn't show value in your offer, in your product, and it brings down the entire industry. And you yourself will be attracting people who are attracted more to price than to value. And they're not always a good customer to serve. If you're aligned with your values, you won't find the same people aligned with the same values if you're focused on price, because you'll find people who are also focused on price, and they're not always the best people and I'm thinking again from a workshop point of view, they're not always going to be your best students. They won't give their full effort, or you get what I mean, right, Andi?
Oh, yeah. It's the best way I can make a comparison is in the retail space. We all know where those bargain shops are, and we all have an image of the person that goes to those stores and always wants the cheapest price, no matter what. And then on the flip side, there are the very high-end fancy stores, and you're going to spend a lot of money there. And they're two different clientele, two different types of people. I'm not saying the people that always shop for the bargains are bad people. That's not a judgment. It's very smart to be frugal and research your purchases. But on the other hand, there is a spectrum. And we have to understand, as business owners and as service providers or instructors, that we don't have to please everybody. The Coach bag place is, doesn't care if, the dollar store bag lady is missing out. They're just focused on, what type of bag does my Coach devotee want to purchase, and I will make the best thing possible for them. Versus the dollar store says, there are people that are pinching pennies, and we want to give them some options. And so they fill that niche as well. So
you're saying exactly what I was going to say. Know your audience. Make sure you are pricing for value, not for time, and you are finding those right customers, whether you are on the lower end or the higher end, depending on what you're offering.
One thought I had with the question about the pricing for being able to thrive, you have to feel good about your prices. And so you have to get to that point of, this is what I offer, this is what it costs, period. And be able to just confidently
shut up.
Exactly.
Give your price and shut up. Let it sit and let it be. It's your price. It's what you need.
Yeah. And it may take a while to grow into that confidence of, especially if it's a higher price than you have been charging. There's a lot of mindset work that goes into that as well. So do the work to improve your mindset, to know your worth, and to live into that thriving, profitable space. Okay, so you are focused on workshops. So what is your strategy when you say, okay, I want to teach this thing? How do you set a price on that?
So first, I get familiar with what people in my industry are charging for a similar workshop, So what are they charging? And then I get to know exactly, very specifically, who my ideal client is that I want to invite into this workshop. So I get to know exactly what they're used to paying. So not only do I look at my competitors, my colleagues, I look at what they're already used to being paid, even inside the industry or outside. But I look at both of those. And then one thing I would invite you to do is get obsessed, and that might be the wrong word, might be a little strong, but obsessed with testimonials and feedback so that you can provide that value to keep your prices premium so that you are getting paid to thrive. I think that could be a great theme for our episode, is getting paid to thrive. When you're thinking about how you're setting up your pricing for your workshop, also keep in mind that when you're getting to know your ideal customer, when in their journey are they entering your workshop? For instance, when I was teaching color confidence, I know that most of my ideal audience with color confidence are typically adventurous beginners. So they've started quilting, they're working with fabric, but they're stuck somewhere. Either they're stuck because they couldn't start a project because they didn't know what colors went together, or they're stuck because they pull these palettes, they have these great ideas, but nothing's looking quite right. They can't quite make it happen. So I knew that that's who I needed to appeal to. I didn't need to appeal to brand new quilters that are just entering the space. I didn't need to appeal to more experienced quilters that really had their own palette going on, with their own aesthetic. What I wanted to focus on, or those in between, that's where they were going to come into color confidence. Now, while I was teaching it, I did get some of those outliers, or I had beginners brand new to quilting join, and I did have more experienced quilters join because we can always learn something. But my ideal customer were those right in the middle who knew a little bit about color but were stuck. And they already had experience with fabric, but again, they were stuck. Um, and then there is a quote I heard too, about workshops where, and I think this applies to a lot of things, a lot of offers, a lot of pattern design, anything like that, any products that you're offering, is to get to know your ideal customer best out of everyone else. That way you can serve them the best and really lead with that value. Do the math on that value. So we spoke a lot about doing thriving, pricing to thrive. So do your math on your value. And I think that's really special and very powerful for us as instructors, as product designers, to do that math as well. As do the math on how much time have you spent developing this workshop? How much time have you spent learning this skill, perfecting this skill and every little aspect about it so that you have the ability to teach this skill? How much time did you train to get this teaching experience? Because usually with teachers, we have to teach, mess up, mess up, and then we get this amazing workshop at the end. So how much time have you spent just doing that? How much training, again, have you done with books, podcasts, just scrolling on social media, learning tips and tricks about better serving your customer? And then your experience, again, in years. So I've been quilting for 20 years. So when I offered my workshops, I kind of got a weird look a lot because I look very young, but I have been quilting since I was 9. I did have that experience, and I had to find ways to show that I had that experience, to make sure that they understood why I was charging the prices that I was charging. So really map that out for them. Show them your quilting journey, where you start when you were 9 and you've been quilting since then, and show your quilts through the years, whether you're on social media, in your newsletters, whether you're talking and telling a story when you were a child and creating your first quilt. I like to share the one where I made the first one I made completely by myself without any help. I was 12, and it had lime green faux fur, and I was insistent that it had lime green faux fur, and it was a rag quilt. So it didn't rag. Of course it didn't rag, but I loved it so much. And it makes people laugh, and it makes them think about how, yeah, she has been quilting for, 20 plus years. And that gives value, and it shows my experience. It shows my value. It's social proof. It really, really helps. And it validates my own worth and my own self-value. It's like, yeah, I've been doing this for 20 years. I can charge like a good price for a workshop because I have this experience and I want to share that. But yeah, that's a lot to consider. And then, like Andi was saying, I even wrote that down. Expect people to pay your price. Give them the price. And I know that shut up might not be the best way to say this, but stay silent. Give them the price and stop.
Yeah, you don't have to continually justify and especially don't apologize.
No.
That,
Oh, no.
I'm sorry it has to be this much. No, this is the price. And I think, and I know that, there could be a lot of sociological reasons for our hesitations around pricing and sales in the quilting industry. I think a lot of it, we are not coming from that kind of corporate MBA style negotiation tactics. This is a cottage industry. We're just growing out of our hobby and trying to share what we love. So it's hard to put a price on that. But yeah, I like what you've said about doing your research out there, knowing your ideal customer. What else should we consider?
Making it irresistible by showing them the 3 F's. I love this one. I heard this the other day and I was like, that is perfect. 3 F's are frustration. What are they frustrated with? How do you fix it? That's the second F. Fix. So a frustration fix, and then follow up with them. Again, get obsessed with that feedback so that you can improve, you can use their language, and you can show how you fix their problem. And I have one more, and then I'm done.
Okay.
The last one, I want to say it right. And this is go against the grain. This is totally going to go against the grain of a lot of things you've heard, even what I used to write about and talk about. But increase your prices by removing things from your products or services, especially as a workshop instructor. We tend to want to throw everything in the kitchen sink into a workshop. But if your workshop is not focused enough, if it is not solving a singular problem, a singular frustration, it's going to look messy. It's not going to give the value you hope it's giving. It's going to confuse your customer. So think about that. Think about what can you take out to increase the value, because taking things out will allow you to get your client, your customer, a better result or a faster result, because they're not doing X, Y, Z and all the other things. They're focused on the one problem that you're solving with your workshop.
And we've had a lot of our guest interviews talk about simplifying and how much that improved their success rate. That, when you're all scattered and trying to do too many things, I can really see how that is a benefit. And obviously, if you take things off of your plate in terms of a workshop pricing structure, then you have lower costs, which means that your profit margin goes up.
And you're not worried about collecting payment. If you have one price, you don't have to worry about, is it going to be month to month to month? No, it's this price for the year. Or I'm thinking block of the month. That's what's popping in my head. That's typically what we pay month to month for in the quilting industry. It's like a block of the month or something. So I'm thinking you have one price for the year. This is the price. You don't have to worry about credit card charging. You don't have to worry about hooking up. How are you going to charge that month to month to month? It is one price for the year.
I'm sensing that workshops can be a couple different varieties, because we may have some people in our audience that are teaching in person and some are setting up online workshops. Do you have any different strategies according to what platform people are on?
I charge the same for in-person versus virtual. And now the only caveat to that is if you have to pay for a space. So if you're paying for a physical building, your price needs to be taken into account while you're pricing your workshop. So anywhere I've taught so far has been a local quilt shop in person or a guild place where they pay for it. But especially with guild programs, I put just as much work into an online virtual presentation as I do to walk on the stage. There's even more work to do an online presentation for me than it is to travel and do, unless it's an airplane ride, honestly. But typically I travel in the area, or I did, especially in Arizona, I traveled a lot and I would drive there. So it was it was the same amount of effort to prepare a in-person and a virtual presentation for guilds and the workshops. And then when I taught so I had a skill building block a month online. It was a full-blown program. Every month they got a new block with a new video that shows them how to do it. I went step by step. I did all the things in the kitchen sink. And that's what I think made it struggle, because when I started taking stuff out, it started getting better. But I digress. I broke those up into quarterly, because it was 4 skills and each skill was 3 months. So I would take those skills and I would teach them at my local quilt shop 3 weeks in a row. So I had an applique workshop that was 3 weeks. I had a foundation paper piecing workshop that was 3 weeks. And again, I charged the same price. It was all the same because it was the same amount of effort, same amount of time. And in some ways, it was a little bit more time to do it online because of all the recording and the editing. The editing, oh my gosh. And Andi, editing videos takes almost twice as long as it does to actually record the thing. So definitely pricing strategy for in-person versus virtual is the same for me. And if in-person is more expensive, I will tend to lean towards that in-person price.
There's so many things that go into that over the years. When I teach at a local shop, there may be negotiations with the shop in terms of they take a portion of the fee that you charge the students. So, I feel that's a little bit separate than being able to just set your rates for trunk shows and workshops. And obviously hosting it yourself online.
Okay, that's a good point because I didn't take that into consideration while I was explaining that. My price that I set was so with the shop owner, we charged the students that coverage fee. So I still got $45 per student when they came to teach because I had to cover a babysitter. That was the thing. Like I had to cover a babysitter. I have to make $45 per student. So we priced that out together and figured out what could she offer for her customers to come in, and we worked it out. So that was definitely in our negotiation.
Yeah. So don't be afraid to ask for what you want or what you need, because everything is negotiable and you can find a way to make it work. So that's very encouraging.
Remember, we're charging by value to thrive.
Yep. Two important considerations.
So I know that we want to dive also into services because Andi has a great perspective on that. Before we do, I just want to lay out guild prices, like industry standard to start, because I know that is a big question that comes up in a lot of different places. So to start, either it's digital or in person. Remember, I charge the same thing, and many teachers do, even when they're starting out, charge the same thing for a virtual program versus an in-person program. But the base to start has been between $300 and $350. So if you're brand new presenting to guilds, we're starting around $300 to $350, depending on your specific skill that you're teaching. So of course, if it's more advanced, if it is a very unique niche for you, you could charge a little bit higher. But if you are a brand new teaching to guilds, typically it's between $300 to $350. And then again, you raise it from there. So the longer you're in the industry, the longer you're presenting, the longer you're teaching for guilds, the more you can charge. You can go up an increment every year and charge as much as, say, a professional like Tula Pink. Do you guys remember what Tula Pink like charges? I don't know if that's known, but it blew my mind. A little insider tip from my mom, who we've talked a little bit about on the podcast, but she's very involved in her local guild, and they had looked at seeing if they could get Tula Pink to come. And this was 5 or 6 years ago, so I'm sure her prices have raised since then. But I believe it was $5,000 for I think it was 2-hour presentation for her to come out to Bakersfield, where they are, and present for their guild. And they have a larger guild, but they couldn't make that happen.
Right. Yeah. That's when you get to those kind of celebrity names that are known worldwide, you are going to pay a lot more. But it's encouraging to people, even starting out, do not feel like you have to do things for free just because you're brand new. You have the skills to back up your price. So just get out there and do it. Do not undervalue. We want to thrive.
And I heard one piece of advice a podcaster gave, and off the top of my head, I can't remember which quilting industry podcaster said it, but they said, teach for your local guild first, free. And I cringed. I was like, how about 50% off? Because it's your very first one you've ever done, ever. How about 50% off? Not free, 50% off. It gives you, again, that value to thrive. It gives you incentive to get up on that stage, and it encourages you to go for more and to get better. When I offer something for free, it's very draining. And I'm sure that other people feel the same. When they're offering things constantly for free, it feels so draining, especially for something you've put so much time, so much effort, so much experience in, and you're so excited about. And then afterwards, it's like, yay, I did it. And then it's like, yay, I did it. Like, that didn't feel as good as I hoped. And if you do it for free, it's not always encouraging to do it again. That's not to say volunteer work or helping people out here and there is something you have to charge for every single time. I'm talking about a contracted presentation where you're up on stage, giving it your all. You're teaching, you're presenting, you're storytelling. It's a lot of work and a lot of preparation. So don't do that. So that's a presentation. That's about 45 minutes to an hour presentation. And then lastly, the workshops. Typically, a guild asks for either a 4-hour workshop to 6-hour workshop. That's usually a shortened one, or a full day that can go up to 8 hours. So that range starting out is between 600 and 800. And again, you can go up the more experienced, the more niche, the more in demand your program is. Like honestly, if you start presenting and the next year comes around and you raise your price by $50 and you're getting so many inquiries that you can't fill them all, raise your price,
Yeah.
please. You are in demand. Raise your price. Yes, you will have guilds say no, but that is a good thing. You will make more money, have more free time while giving them a great value.
Yeah, some other entrepreneur friends I talk to, they're like, yeah, it's time to raise your prices. Do it now. So,
Definitely.
and I think that goes the same way for services as well, because I've noticed that in my long arm business that I certainly have work backed up. And anytime that you've got that, it's the law of supply and demand. If you've got people lined up around the block and you're feeling overwhelmed, raise your price a little bit, cut down on the number of people knocking on your door. It seems like that's backwards, but you'll actually make more money, per quilt versus slaving away for lower prices. So let me tell you a little bit more about long arm pricing strategies. And again, same principles as Tori set out for workshops. You do want to do your research in the local area. That just kind of gives you a baseline. It will possibly take a little more explanation if you are wildly more expensive than people are used to paying for the same service. There are regional differences. I know obviously big city urban areas that may have more quilters, the price may be a little higher versus I'm thinking of, people that come to Arizona from other states, Midwest US. They're saying, oh, I can get a queen size quilt done for whatever low ball price. That, in my opinion, is a total bargain. But I attribute that to regional differences. Now,
And Andi, where are you located? Just so everybody knows.
I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's a big city, lots of quilt shops, and lots and lots of long armors. And I think we're starting to see more and more people with long arms just for personal use. So, the prices have come down. There's so many brands and things out there. That's another whole conversation. But the typical strategy that I hear is to price by the square inch, because it would be very hard to set a price for, say, a twin size, a queen, and a king at a set price for each of those three, when there are wild variations in what I consider a twin versus what you might consider a twin. And it's just easier to set your increments based on a square inch. And then within that, you might have different pricing levels based on the technique that you use. A lot of quilters will use a pantograph or an all over edge to edge design. And many quilters get computerized machines that can do those edge to edge designs. And typically that's a little bit lower price point than completely hand guided custom designs. So those are my two buckets. I have a lower price for edge to edge design and a higher price for custom design. And then there's other minor variations. I mean, even within that custom quilting category, you could have just kind of loose and flowing versus really dense with 10, 12 color changes versus maybe one color in the center and a different color in the border. You can make some variations there for your pricing strategy. But I
So
will
would it be
say,
fair to call that tiered pricing?
yes, definitely different tiers of prices. If you are considering getting a long arm, I highly support that. It's a lot of fun. It's a great way to make money from your quilting. Learn to do custom work, and that is an untapped market. I feel like I'm the only one in town that does custom work. There's a lot of quilters out there, like I said, with the lower cost of machines and the computerized systems that are readily available. They just dive in and they start churning out all over designs, which is great. But there are people that really want custom work, and it will keep you busy. The only drawback to long arm quilting is that it is not scalable. There are only 24 hours in a day, and I am only one person. So if I have to stand at the machine and do the custom quilting, I can, there are physical reality limitations to that. So it's not like a virtual workshop where I could record it and offer it over and over again. So you are trading time for money there. That's a limitation of that.
So your price needs to reflect that, audience. Your price needs to reflect that. That's a lot of
Yes.
physical labor. You're standing for hours. Just want
Yes.
to highlight that. You are standing for hours. You need a price for value, price for thriving. That's what we're doing.
Yes. And I do, although you said not to set your price based on time, I do like to keep my hourly rate in mind, because I do have a value on my time, and I have a hourly range that allows me to feel good and feel like I'm providing value and thriving in my business. So if it takes me extra hours for a quilt that is dropping me below that imagined hourly rate, then I am going to revisit my pricing strategy and make sure that I can reach that desired rate for what I want.
I love that. I love it.
And just some other minor considerations in the pricing of your quilts. If you are offering long arm services, you have to decide if you are going to provide the batting or have the customers bring that to you. Just be careful that you are covering your costs if you're going to supply the batting and paying appropriate sales taxes. And I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant, but there are implications if you are paying retail and charging at someone else. And, those transactions need to just cover your legal requirements there with that. And then one other kind of add-on service that you can provide as a quilter is attaching the binding for your customers. So you can have a menu of services, as I said at the beginning, whether you're offering pantographs or custom quilting, and then some of these extras you could add on if you are going to even trimming the quilt down, because for some customers, I just take the quilt off the machine and hand it to them, and they're responsible for trimming the excess batting away and attaching the binding. Other customers, I may do one or both of those next steps.
I like that visual of a menu. That's a good way to put that, a menu of pricing.
Yeah, and some long armors have they've completely put it in black and white, and they have an intake form that lists all the different options, which is a good idea to, if you're going to run a business, act like a business and have those contracts in place, whether it's for your workshops, as we were mentioning, working with guilds, or working with customers that bring you a quilt for long arm services.
Definitely get with a lawyer and see what they suggest you provide legal wise, definitely. Because we are not lawyers, we cannot give you legal advice.
That is true.
So one thing I also have noticed is a few quilters, long armors, will charge by stitch count. Have you seen that?
I don't have any direct experience with that, but I can imagine how that would work because that's certainly a setting on your machine. You can do the stitch count. And I have heard people kind of a similar concept. They have a set number of bobbins that's
Mm.
kind of included, and then I always lose track, so I would be very bad at trying to upcharge for extra bobbins.
Oh, I like those couple different ways to kind of keep track of bobbins, stitch count, density based off of your custom quilting. I love all that. I think those are really good strategies, whichever one works for you and the way you think about pricing.
Yeah, I go kind of as my own curiosity factor. As I said, I keep an hourly rate in the back of my mind, and I'll keep track of the runtime on my machine so that I know how long, and which is similar to stitch count, I think. But I just keep a little notebook of when I put a quilt on and how many hours that it runs to stitch it out. So,
Oh, that would be fascinating. What's the longest? Do you know the longest time you've noted down?
um, well, there have been quilts that stay on my machine for weeks, but I'm not stitching for, 21 days straight. So it's one of those catch 22s because, I can do a smaller lap type quilt in just a couple hours. So when I say, a really intense quilt may take 12 or more hours, 12 hours doesn't sound that long, but in comparison, that's quite a bit.
You can only stand and move that gigantic machine so long.
Yeah, I feel like I'm doing good if I can get 30 to 60 minutes a day during the week. Obviously, we're both doing quilt stuff part-time, so and then yeah, I have to take a lot of breaks. So I'll long arm for a while, and then I'll go sit at my machine on the weekend and do some piecing for upcoming patterns, and then get back to it.
So if you're enjoying listening to Quilting on the Side, we have a mission for you. We are trying to reach 25 reviews and ratings. So most of our listeners come from Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So if you are listening to this on Apple Podcast, please leave a review. If you are listening to this on Spotify, please give us a star rating. Thank you so much and enjoy this episode of Quilting on the Side. So do you have
Sure.
any tips on pricing patterns other than what we've covered so far? Because I think if some of the stuff we've talked about covers that. Be sure that you are covering cost for prints, especially if it's, of course, a printed pattern. PDF, you're also paying for Adobe. You're paying for your software that you use to design it and to print it, including paper and ink just to draw. I don't know about you guys, but when I design a pattern, I tend to print things out multiple times. I color, scratch out, scribble on, redraw. I am constantly printing things out, so I do take that into account, and and then time spent as well, and your experience as well.
Yeah. It We've been having a really interesting discussion in a pattern writing group about the different sizes to include on your patterns,
Oh yeah.
because if you and I'm across the board. I have some patterns that are one size, and that's just the size of the quilt, and that's it. And I have other patterns that have multiple sizes, and they're priced the same. All of my patterns are one price, whether you get one size, three sizes, or five, whatever. So it's really an interesting discussion then, because what do you do if someone comes, and your pattern is a twin size, but they want to make it a king? I personally, to me, quilt design is fun. It's a fun challenge. I've got the software. I can do the math. I will do that. But it's a design fee. So, I
Oh,
just
I
had this
like that.
conversation at the quilt shop because a lady saw a panel and it had some borders on it. And she's like, I want to make that. Andy, help me. How much fabric should I get? And I'm like, well, are you really asking me to sit down and draft a pattern for you? Because this is what I charge for that. Oh,
I feel
guess
so
I'll just
proud of you
figure
right
it
now.
out.
Did you all hear that? No, did you all hear that? Did you hear what she did? That is perfect. That is perfect. Clarify, are you asking me
Yeah, yeah,
to design a pattern for you? That is great. That leads you right into your pricing. And then again, say your price and stop.
yep. And then people can just figure it out most of the time.
Yeah, that's a yes or no for them. They'll know. They will
Yeah,
know. Is it
yeah.
if the value is there, they will know.
Um, and then just to finish up with that story, the funny part is that I do offer a class through my local shop about adding borders to panels. So you can sign up for the class and I'll, help you with a custom pattern. But
Oh, that's great. Thinking about with patterns, distributors. So if you want to in the future reach out to distributors, you want to keep in mind that they are going to want your patterns at wholesale cost, which is typically 50% of retail. And then they expect you to sell them at the same price that they are selling your patterns. So keep all that in mind when you're pricing your patterns. My patterns, if you go on my site right now, they are all priced differently, especially the printed ones, because of how the printer priced me. I am no longer looking at distributors. So I am pricing by value. I am pricing to thrive, right? So my patterns are there for those that loved what they saw and want to go find them. But I'm not reaching out to distributors currently. Now, in the future, if I change my mind, that is something that I'm going to need to adjust, is to make sure all of my patterns are the prices that they need to be to meet the requirements for distributors. But currently, mine are all priced differently, and I'm okay with that.
with patterns, one of the small costs that you forgot to mention was UPC codes. So that's always a new quilter business owner question of where do you get, there are websites that sell UPC codes. So, you buy a bundle of barcodes and then you put those on your patterns. So the resources are out there, but again, you have to collect all these different inputs and make a determination of how many patterns you need to sell to cover all the costs plus a little bit of profit. And we have a revenue planning sheet that can help you with that. So visit quiltingontheside.com and we will put a link to that resource for you in the show notes. So what has your experience been selling finished quilts?
So I actually started my business selling finished quilts, and I ended up pivoting because I wasn't making enough money. However, I started with a lot of baby blankets. I was charging $45 for a baby blanket. It was 2 layers, and I always had minky on the back or cuddle fabric on the back. And I would probably make a profit of about $9. It's not great to say, but $9. I made probably 65 of those? I think it was about 65 of those.
I can't even imagine that you made any profit if you consider the cost of the materials plus your time sewing. There's got to be more than $45 worth of stuff in a baby blanket.
Oh my gosh, that's what's so frustrating now, is because I think I was charging myself like $10. I thought minimum wage at that point was what I made when I was a teenager, which was about $9. So I was like pricing for $9 an hour. And I got good enough to where I could make a baby blanket within about 2 hours. That wasn't too bad, but nobody would buy like a $55 baby. I mean, I probably could find people, but where I was located at the time, which was South Carolina, that's where I mainly sold stuff. There wasn't a huge audience for that pricing. But then I also had custom quilts that I would make, and I would charge those. I got better at charging for those. My first ones were like $100. The first one I made was probably almost a twin size. It was a baby shower. They signed a block, right? A square, and I sewed it together and created a scrappy looking just patchwork, and I put a border on it and basically made it a big blanket. She didn't really want it to be quilty and fluffy, but it still was less. It was like maybe it was a little over 100 for that one, but it was less than $200, which at this point I would probably charge more like 350, maybe 400, because I didn't have to buy any supplies. She gave them all to me. But still, it's a lot of time and effort. And then as I grew and I got more experience, I got requests for a lot of memory blankets. I started quilting panels and putting borders on them, just like Andi was describing. Those sold really well. And they were on the less expensive side for me, but I was still only making like, for a panel quilt, I got it, one festival I went to was a Star Wars themed one. So I bought 3 Star Wars panels. I put um, borders around them to the point where they were a good lap size quilt, like a pretty good, almost twin. Um, and I hand guided quilted them, free motion quilted, and bound with fleece inside. And I got the fleece on discount, and so I was able to price those at I did a little higher because I actually kind of wanted to keep them. So I put my price a little higher than I normally would, which was like 250. And even now I'm like, I could probably put that even higher, even at that time, because of how well they turned out. And I sold all 3 of them. So I was able to make the booth price back, but I wasn't making enough revenue to feel good about what I was doing. And that's when I realized all of that. And then how if I kept doing this, it would just drain our bank account basically and all my energy. So I switched to pattern design.
Yeah. And
But
there's a lot of quilters in the same boat that, they do have a few finished quilts for sale, or they'll do a sample sale once or twice a year, so that they're not constantly trying to sell finished quilts. But as we've said, it's so hard to be profitable or even cover your costs a lot of times for things that, most people just give up and are like, I'm not going to make any money at selling finished quilts. So here, I'll just make them for my family and friends and for
now
charity. So
there is a caveat though. I will say there is a caveat. If you are willing to put in the time to find those customers, it can be profitable. Those showstopper quilts can go for thousands of dollars. And if you get real good and quick, you have to be quick. That's part of it. Is that the general public who tends to buy quilts, because typically quilters will buy quilts if they absolutely like fall in love. However, your ideal audience, will be quilt purchasers. You're looking for customers who have the money to spend on custom quilts. Now, if you have the time and energy to put into finding that ideal customer, you can make this a viable business. I was not there. I did not want to do that,
I've always
but I
been
could see it.
intrigued with the idea of, finding some local business that had a wall space. You know how you see the art in coffee shops and it's for sale? I need to
Yes.
find a Patreon type person to do that in the local area. My bank down the street you go in the lobby and there's this big empty wall, and I'm like, I should call the manager and, just as kind of advertising, not necessarily to sell a quilt, but if that happened, I wouldn't complain. But
Your
I
postage
haven't
stamp
taken the
quilt,
time to do that. But that's
the Arizona one with all the little tiny squares, that always gets so much. I could just see you hanging that up and saying, if you want to know anything about quilting, like,
yeah.
or
And
whatever your offer is to follow up, add that
with
on the little
QR
placard.
codes these days, it would be very easy to put your little artist statement next to it. So
Oh,
yeah. So, sometimes you have to
so
think outside the box. And
when you said that, I remembered my mom just had and I said she's very involved with her guild, and they stopped doing a quilt show and they started doing a quilt auction to raise money for their guild. So instead of a quilt show, they're doing a quilt auction, and they make it a big what to do. And people in the community could buy tables, they buy tickets to come. They have a silent auction of baskets that are mostly donated from either the local area or quilters in the room. And then the guild makes quilts for them to auction off. And you could tell some of them make them just for fun and then bring them in because they're like, I loved making it, but I'm done with it. Here, you guys can have it. There was one, my mom actually went to a retreat. And a lot of people that went to this retreat are also in the same guild. So she brought scraps of all different colors, sorted them by color, and then had each person make a 25 square quilt. They're like 2.5-inch squares. So they're, it's like a 12-inch square at that point. We've got all these different squares. So she just lined them up, made it like a rainbow, like a patchwork pixelated rainbow. It sold for $1,000.
Nice.
And it was scraps just sewn together to look pretty. I mean, can you imagine? Like, if you really, like I said, put the time and effort into this, you could make that a viable business. But it's just finding that ideal customer. I almost said client, but yeah, the same thing. Ideal customer, ideal client, where you're making quilts that are beautiful that they want to buy, but you also are probably taking in custom orders as well. And memory quilts, that is a big market. I feel like a lot of people will pay good money to help their memories stay alive, whether it's for their family members or for themselves. I think that's another way you can really make a viable business is with memory quilts.
Yeah. So I think we have found some common themes, whether you are selling workshops, whether you are offering a service such as longarm quilting, or even making finished quilts. And that is that you need to do your market research, you need to price for value, and set a price that allows you to thrive. So if you are finding these episodes as inspirational as we do, and you need to take notes, Tori, what would you suggest?
I would suggest going to Quilting on the Side website and downloading your own notebook from Quilting on the Side. We have this really cool Ohio star on the cover with a white brick background, and it's spiral bound. So those that can't see this, it's spiral bound notebook. It's purse size, I would say. So it fits with you on the go, and it has this really cool pocket in the back for anything you want to store for later.
You can decorate it with the Quilting on the Side sticker. Yep. Yay! On the notebook or on your drink tumbler. So yeah, please check out the Quilting on the Side website and our shop that has all sorts of fun merchandise.
And hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our next chat. Until then, remember to have fun in your business and do a little quilting on the side.